What's up, guys, and welcome to my channel. I'm Brandon Smith. It is absolutely freezing outside, but that is not going to stop me. Let's get right into it. The day is Friday, December 6, 1991. The film Addams Family is #1 at the box office. Set Adrift on Memory Bliss by hip-hop R&B duo PM Dawn is #1 on the Billboard charts, and in just 2 days, the leaders of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine will sign an agreement officially ending the Soviet Union. In Austin, Texas, 17-year-olds Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas are working the night shift at I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. Jennifer's younger sister, 15-year-old Sarah, and her friend, 13-year-old Amy Ayers, arrive at the yogurt shop looking for a ride home. The two younger girls wait in the storefront as the two older girls make haste in the back, readying the store for close, which is less than an hour away. Today will be the last days of their lives. This day in mystery. Friday, December 5th in Austin, Texas was mild and damp. With a daytime high of 18 degrees Celsius, the threat of a thunderstorm was prevalent throughout the day. But now, hours to midnight, the threat has subsided. The I Can't Believe It's Yogurt store at 2949 West Anderson Lane has been a staple of the Austin community for many years. Tonight, it is being operated by two high school seniors, Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison. Thomas works as a shift leader and has been with the company for about a year. Harbison is a counter helper. Her parents agreed to buy her a car in the summer on the condition that she got a job to help with the payments. Jennifer has been there since June. At 9:10 p.m., Jennifer's younger sister, 15-year-old Sarah, and her friend, 13-year-old Amy Ayers, push open the plum-colored main entrance door and enter the yogurt shop. Amy is spending the night at the Harbison home, and the two hope Sarah's big sister will be kind enough to drive them home. She says she will, but the yogurt shop does not close for another 50 minutes, so the two must wait. They take a seat just to the right of the counter. 9:50 p.m. strikes and Eliza heads for the door. She passes a couple on her way to the door. She tells them that she must lock the door. The store policy dictates that she must lock the door 10 minutes before close. The couple smiles and say they are leaving anyways. Two customers still remain in the store. Two men sit at a booth just to the left of the counter, directly adjacent to Sarah and Amy. This situation is not unusual for Eliza and Jennifer. They lock the door to prevent new customers from coming in. It's 10 minutes till close and they still have work to do. Once the men do decide to leave, they will lock the door behind them before closing down the shop for the night. At 11:47 p.m., a patrolman from the Austin Police Department notices a fire in the yogurt shop. He runs for the front door, but it is locked. He radios it in to his dispatcher and waits for fire rescue to respond. Firefighters gain access to the building through an unlocked rear entrance and douse the flames. Once the fire is extinguished, the first responders survey the wreckage. Directly behind the counter, they find the nude, lifeless bodies of Eliza, Jennifer, and Sarah. Behind the storefront, in a separate part of the shop, they find the fourth girl, Amy Ayers, bound and lifeless on the linoleum floor. Viewer discretion is advised, as these next details are not pleasant. So if you want to skip ahead, I'll insert a timestamp just here to let you avoid the super gory stuff. For those of you that have stuck around, here we go. Each of the four girls had been shot in the back of the head execution style with a .22 caliber lead bullet. The execution style gunshot to the head of Amy missed her brain. As such, she was shot a second time through the top of her head, severely damaging her brain this time before exiting through the jaw, killing her instantly. She was found with a sock-like cloth around her neck. Sarah and Eliza had their hands tied behind their backs with a pair of panties. Both had been gagged. Sarah, unlike any of the other girls, had been raped. Sarah, Eliza, and Jennifer were charred and described as burned beyond recognition. Amy had received second and very early third-degree burns on 25 to 30% of her body. Autopsy results showed high levels of BTU output, which suggested an accelerant may have been used. Sarah and Eliza's bodies were found stacked on top of each other, just beside Jennifer's body. The coroner theorized that all 4 girls were stacked on top of each other, with Jennifer's body on top of the others before being disturbed when Amy crawled to the back of the yogurt shop. On October of the next year, Austin investigators were asked to fly to Mexico to provide details to the Mexican authorities about the yogurt shop murders. The Mexican authorities told them that Porfirio Villa Saavedra, nicknamed the Terminator, had confessed to the crime and was being held in a Mexico City prison. He also identified his 2 co-conspirators in the crime, Alberto Cortez and Ricardo Hernandez. Cortez was in custody, but Hernandez remained at large. The 3 were already known to Austin police. They had previously been indicted by a Travis County grand jury for the November 1991 sexual assault of a 23-year-old Austin woman while she was leaving a nightclub. Later that month, Mexico City police announced that all 3 men were being charged with murder. Austin Senior Sergeant Hector Reveles declined to say whether he thought the Mexican police had the right men, but did suggest that one of the suspects looked like the description of a man seen outside the yogurt shop just before the murders took place. American officials are often skeptical of Mexican confessions, as the country has a long history of coercion bordering on torture. At his arraignment in December, Saavedra recanted his confession and told the court that he had been tortured into confessing. Austin authorities believed him and never pursued any charges against any of the 3 men. Kenneth McDuff was born and raised in Rosebud, Texas, a town with a population of just 1,400 people, about an hour and a half north of Austin. In 1966, he murdered 3 teenagers, Edna Sullivan, her boyfriend Robert Brand, and Brand's cousin Mark Dunham. All 3 were strangers to McDuff. He was given 3 death sentences by the state of Texas. These sentences were later commuted to life sentences, and unbelievably, he was paroled in 1989. To the surprise of absolutely no one, McDuff killed again, at least 6 more times. However, most investigators believe the actual number is closer to 14. Just 3 weeks after the yogurt shop murders on December 29, 1991, McDuff drove to an Austin car wash with an accomplice named Alva Hank Worley and kidnapped 28-year-old Colleen Reed in plain sight of eyewitnesses before driving away. In the next few hours, he repeatedly raped and tortured Reed before ultimately killing her. On May 4th, 1992, McDuff was again apprehended, this time in Kansas City, Missouri. On November 17th, 1998, he confessed to the murders of the Yogurt Shop 4. Hours later, he was exterminated by lethal injection at the Texas State Penitentiary. Post-mortem, Austin officials admitted that they had at one point considered McDuff the prime suspect in the murders. McDuff was proven to be in the area at the time of the murders. Additionally, the murders of the Austin 4 bear an uncanny similar brutality to McDuff's other known murders. McDuff was known as a capricious killer, and if he saw a woman, or more often, a teenage girl that he liked, he would act decisively, with zero morality, regardless of the circumstance. Just days after the murder, a local youth was apprehended by police in an Austin mall in possession of a .22 caliber handgun. 15-year-old Maurice Pierce was brought in for questioning regarding the murders. He said that in the day in question, he had been hanging out with 3 other teenagers, 14-year-old Forrest Wellborn, 15-year-old Robert Springsteen Jr., and 16-year-old Michael Scott. After a full interrogation, investigators were satisfied that none of the kids has anything to do with the murders. 8 years later, a new detective took over the case. After studying the case files, he surmised that the boys were in fact guilty of the 1991 murders. From here, he set to work on proving his theory, and on September 9, 1999, he brought in the now 24-year-old Michael Scott to discuss the yogurt shop murders. After being questioned for 4 hours, he furnished the detective with a full confession and admitted to firing the gun that killed the girls at least once on the night in question. He also identified his co-conspirators. Now living in West Virginia, detectives next brought in Springsteen for a chat. Like Scott, Springsteen Jr. also claimed that he had killed at least one of the girls. Springsteen also confessed to raping one of the girls. He, like Scott, also identified his co-conspirators as Wellborn and Pierce. The two outstanding accused were quickly apprehended by law enforcement, and on October 6, 1999, all four were charged with murder. The case was maligned with dysfunction from its onset. An Austin grand jury failed to return a verdict of indictment for Maurice Pierce and Forrest Wellborn, and the charges against the two were summarily dropped. Internal affairs also plagued the case. Detective Hector Polanco was fired for coercing confessions, and Austin Police data processing employee Karen Huntley was shown to have a relationship with the father of Robert Springsteen Jr., Robert Springsteen Sr. The attorneys for both Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen Jr. argued that their clients' confessions had been coerced and should not stand. Nevertheless, despite the protests of the defense, the trial went forward against the two remaining defendants. And on June 21, 2001, both Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen Jr. were found guilty and sentenced to death. This would not be the end of their story, however. Much more was to come in the legal life of Scott and Springsteen. First, in June 2006, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned Robert Springsteen's conviction on the basis of an unfair trial. The jury was able to hear evidence from Michael Scott during the trial of Robert Springsteen. Yet, Michael Scott was not able to participate in the trial or be cross-examined. On February 2007, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to reinstate the conviction. In August 2008, the defense lawyers for Michael and Robert requested DNA testing of alternative suspects. DNA had been found inside Sarah Harbison as a result of the sexual assault. After processing the DNA, was found to not match any of the four Austin teenagers. 7 of the 12 jurors from the original trial testified that they would not have voted to convict the men had this evidence been available at the time. As a result, on June 24, 2009, Judge Mike Lynch decided that Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen should be given new trials. Additionally, he ruled that the two men should be freed on bond pending their new trials. At 2:50 p.m. that day, Robert Springsteen Jr. and Michael Scott walked out of jail as free men. On October 28, 2009, all of the charges against the two were dismissed. Alright, so here's what I think happened. Full disclosure, I just finished a whole write-up on how I believed Alva Worley and Kenneth McDuff were responsible for the crimes. But the further I got in the paragraph, the more I came to the conclusion that they were not. The fact that he was in the area at the very time is very damning. Additionally, the sheer brutality of the crimes has McDuff written all over it. However, what finally swayed me from this argument was the weapon. Throughout his criminal career, Kenneth McDuff was known as the broomstick killer. And after poring over the details of all of his known victims and those he is strongly suspected of killing, I realized that not one of them was killed by shooting. All 4 of the girls at the yogurt shop were killed by shooting. For this fact alone, I just can't believe Kenneth McDuff was the perpetrator. Next, do I think it was the Mexican nationals? Absolutely not. The only evidence that exists against them was that they were in Austin at the time. One looked similar to a man standing outside the yogurt shop, and at one point they were implicated in a sexual assault. Pretty light in my opinion. I also don't think Springsteen and company were guilty of these crimes. I, like the jury, just can't get past the DNA. It's not theirs. Any of theirs. So are we to believe, like the Austin police still believe to this day, that there were actually 5 of them there that night? And what, through their whole ordeal, not one of them gave this other person up, but had no problem rolling on the other 3? There's just no way. So what happened then? Well, I think it is what it is. 2, as yet unknown 20 or 30-year-old men were in the yogurt shop after hours. And after the door locked behind the witnesses, they committed these atrocities and fled into the Austin night, avoiding justice ever since. In 2017, Austin police matched DNA from the rape of Sarah Harbison to a sample the FBI had uploaded into a public research database operated by the University of Central Florida, and thus began a years-long dispute between Austin investigators and their desire to close a decades-old case, and the FBI and its concern about unconstitutional overreach. The DNA in question is a male-only profile called a YSTR, meaning that while the sample itself cannot identify the person who committed the rape, it can reveal his male lineage. The FBI has declined to reveal the identity of the man, a male relative of the killer to be sure, for two main reasons. First, the DNA was gathered by UCF in accordance with the law of anonymity for donors. This means that what we have here is not a 23andMe or GEDmatch situation. The DNA was most likely gathered by the university for scientific purposes, such as cancer screening or state demographics. DNA was given for the sole purpose of progressing science, and the FBI believes that these conditions are sacrosanct. Secondly, with the YSTR type DNA, thousands of men in America alone could bear this fragment of DNA, meaning that the civil rights of thousands could be violated in the search for one guilty party. The I Can't Believe It's yogurt store at 2949 West Anderson Lane is long gone now. A Play It Again Sports is now in its place, but the pain the families feel still remains. The Austin community often describes the night of December 6, 1991 as the night that their city lost its innocence. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Sarah Harbison, Jennifer Harbison, Amy Ayers, and Eliza Thomas. Please feel free to weigh in the comments below, like, and subscribe. Before I go, please know that you are a wonderful individual capable of good. If you are struggling right now, as a lot of us are, please remember that we are in this together and you are here for a reason. Please be kind to yourself and those you come in contact with. I'm Brandon Smith, and I'll see you next time.